Hey, welcome back to the David Elstein podcast. Producing high quality videos is important to most of us marketers and communicators. With us is Clint Smart. He's a longtime videographer. He's worked with hundreds organizations throughout his career. I've asked Clint to come on to the podcast, discuss how communicators can work with videographers to get the types of videos that we want and expect. So, hi, Clint. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Good.
So, are you in Nashville? Are you on some shoot somewhere? Where are you located right now?
So I'm just outside of Nashville. We're in Franklin, Tennessee. It's about a 15-minute drive south. Um,
Cool.
yeah.
Great. And I called you a videographer. What do you want to be? Are you a videographer, a cameraman, and how do you describe yourself?
Well, that question runs deep because you can call me anything you want, really. But I started my career in television news, and we've been called everything from cameraman to you name it. We've been called things I probably can't repeat. Uh,
Right.
but for the most part, I think that the professional term would be um, photojournalist. I think
Okay.
would be the term. But really, I'm a storyteller, and I tell stories with a video camera.
Okay. That's
So,
great. So let's, sort of start at the beginning. You mentioned being in news for a little bit, but how did you get interested in the field and what was your first job in the industry?
well, so I started off. I was in college for music, and I'm a guitar player.
Okay.
And, I got into college, didn't know what I wanted to do. I always liked storytelling, and I think that's what drew me to music was because, the greatest songs are stories.
Okay.
They take you somewhere, they make you feel something, and so I've always kind of been attached to that. I just didn't think I really knew what it was, but, yeah, I went to college for music and then didn't
So I
know
guess stop. So what did you thought you were going to be a rock musician? What were you thinking? Or
I just didn't know.
okay,
It's for a lot of reasons at the time. I was just in that place where I was in college because I thought that's what I needed to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was trying different things, but I had a little bit of a scholarship to play guitar in the jazz band.
okay,
But at the time it was early '90s, late '80s, early '90s, and um, of course, I'd played all kinds of music, but at the time I was very interested in probably rock type music and things like that, and blues. I love blues, so
okay.
kind of that was my thing. But um, I started to realize at some point, I realized that what am I going to do with this? Is this taking me anywhere? Is it taking me somewhere that I think can lead a good life? And I kind of got lost, and I was lucky because I had a friend of the family who happened to be a news director at the TV station in Panama City, Florida. I grew up in North
Okay.
Florida, so near Tallahassee, a little town called Live Oak, Florida. Um, and this guy's name's Larshay Hardy. Was a news director, and he said, "Hey, if you know you want to try this, you can move to Panama City and see if you like working at a television news station." And it just happened to be where I was ready to kind of just drop everything and go and do it. And so that's what I did. So I moved to Panama City. I got a part-time job at a TV station. Um, did everything from sweeping the floors to running the teleprompter to running studio camera, dealing with the anchors. Um,
Did you have any experience before him? And did you know how to operate a camera, do anything before? Was it
no,
really a crash course?
played with a little VHS camcorder that was sitting around the house as a kid, but no, I had no experience, and I
Mm,
got into it, and it was scary. I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew that I didn't want to mess it up, and I knew that it was a great opportunity. And so for about 6 months, I was part time, and then one day the sports anchor came to me and said, "Hey, man." We've got a high school football game tonight. Do you want to go shoot it? I was like, well, I haven't played with the cameras at all. I've kind of been
Right.
stuck in the studio. And he was like, okay. And he put this Panasonic camera similar to this one behind me.
Mhm.
It's a beta cam. Put this camera on the table and said, here's how you turn it on. On the lens, here's the zoom, here's the focus. Go have fun. And so I took the camera and I got in the car and I drove to this high school football game and I started shooting the football game and then turned out okay. And then the next Friday, he was like, you want to do it again? Yeah. So um, I started learning how to use the camera, the buttons, that kind of stuff, and just kind of fell in love with it. I really enjoyed capturing moments. Um, and as a kid growing up watching NFL films, I always tried to mimic the way they
Yep.
shot NFL films.
Sable, yeah, that was a that's it
Yeah.
doesn't get much better than that, yeah.
And what's interesting was that the year that I left news is 2008. So I started in late 1993 is
Okay.
when I got in, and then I left finally television news in 2008. And that year, I did freelance for NFL films. So that was
Oh,
pretty
wow.
cool. Yeah. So I don't know, but that was one of the highlights. But yeah, so I just started doing that, and you know, television news is funny because you get into it, and I have no business being in some of these situations that I'm put into. Um, you know, I'm 20 years old, 21 years old, and I find myself on a murder scene.
Hmm.
Or one day I'm standing in front of a murder scene. The next day we're interviewing um, Rosalind Carter, Jimmy
Hmm.
Carter. Next day we're at a city council meeting, and then I'm shooting high school football again, and then um, we were standing in a room with President Clinton, and I have no business doing any of this. It's like I'm
Right.
not trained for any of this. I'm just there, and so you
Right.
have to just fake it till you make it. They always say that. I
Right.
think that term was invented back in the early '90s, but
Right.
that's what you kind of had to do.
Man, no, you must I don't think about the imposter syndrome, whatever, but President Clinton, whoever's not thinking that, he's just doing, I mean, his job for lack of a better
Right?
term.
He's not worried about
I
me. So.
Yeah, I guess what's the most interesting I'll leave interesting generic. What's the most interesting shoot you've done?
Well, some of the ones that I'm proud of are hurricanes. I've covered. I tried to count once a dozen or so hurricanes, and being in Florida. The very first hurricane I ever covered was Hurricane Opal in 1995 or six,
Okay.
uh, and that was a Category 4. Hit Panama City, did a lot of damage, and it was so that was just pure craziness from beginning, middle, and end.
I'm sure.
It's just crazy because everyone in town's fleeing and you are staying, and it's like a ghost town in these coastal cities where the hurricanes hit. That's neat. I get a lot of I take a lot of pride in um, stories that may not matter to most people, but they mattered to that person. And
Mhm.
I've always enjoyed telling people stories and not messing them up, like not getting in the way of it.
Okay. No,
Yeah.
yeah, no, that's interesting. It makes that sense. I wanna know at least a little bit more about the NFL films. Was it, games, interviews? I mean, what any
Yeah.
stories you could share? I mean, that's
Well,
you think hurricanes are important. I think this doing some for NFL films, I mean, that's the
yeah.
pinnacle.
It was cool. So when I got in, they weren't on film anymore. They were
Okay.
shooting digital. But it was neat. And I could walk us in. I could take 2 hours walking us into how I got there. But basically, starting high school football in Panama City, and then about a year into that, the sports guy was like, "Hey, come to me to Florida State, and we'll start shooting the Florida State games on Saturdays." Started doing
Okay.
that. Started getting, what I felt was good at being a on field, camera on your shoulder type of uh, photographer,
And there was
videographer.
no better timing. That Florida State during the early to mid '90s, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
pretty good.
No, and I've got so many stories about Bobby Bowden, if you know him, he was the coach at the time, and,
Yep,
there was Warren Sapp, all these guys,
yep,
Warwick Dunn. This was like the heyday of Florida State, so I was very
yep,
lucky, and you don't really think about that when you're in it, you know? But looking back, you're like, "Oh, that's pretty cool."
yeah.
And then from there, I left. I worked in South Florida, in Fort Myers, Florida, where we did a lot of work in Miami and Tampa, and so I covered a lot of Bucks games. So
Okay.
it was, anybody want to go cover the Bucks on Sunday? Yeah, I'll do it. And so, we did that a lot, and then moved to Nashville, and of course, we had the Titans. I did a few Titans games, but they had a dedicated sports team here, at the station I worked with in
Mhm.
Nashville. So I didn't do as much Titans. But when I left in 2008, I knew people,
Okay.
and when those people needed people, I volunteered myself to be in the right position to be able to do it. And I knew a guy who was working with NFL films, so it just happened to work out.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's sort of the perfect transition. You say you left news in 2008. Why did you leave news and presumably start your own company because of that?
Yeah, so you never really make a very good living in news. You make a lot of memories. You make a lot of good stories to tell the grandkids one day, but you don't really make a good salary.
Yeah, memories don't pay the bills.
Right. And then, it pays okay. You can survive. And I was fine. I didn't need money, but I got married, and we had a baby. And at the time, I was married to a person who worked at the same station that I worked at.
Okay.
And one of us had to leave. One of us had to do something else because our schedules were just so crazy. Two people married with a child in the news business, just
Yeah.
it just doesn't work. And so I kind of volunteered to be the one to bail with no plan at all.
Mm.
I just thought, hey, I'll figure something out. And so I started doing freelance work, um, NFL films, that kind of stuff. I worked with some entertainment stuff. I did a lot of network news type stuff. Um, and then I had a friend who called and said, "Hey, the governor, we have a full-time videographer with the state of Tennessee, doing marketing videos for the state, and we just fired the guy. And
Okay.
would you be willing to jump in there?" And I said, "How much does it pay?" And he said, "This." And I said, "That's sounds good. Let's do it."
Mhm. Okay.
And so, and essentially, it gave me an 8 to 5 job where I could be, I could be dad when I needed to be dad, and um, not be, on a murder scene, or
Right, right, right.
across the country somewhere. Um, so it was an 8 to 5 job with a camera, and I didn't think that those existed. But it was
Right.
essentially a job with the marketing department. It was called Economic and Community Development,
Okay.
with the state of Tennessee, and it was just a way to tell stories about the state and try to bring business in for the
Mm.
state, and it worked out really well. And that was really where my business started,
Okay.
because there, you know, traveled with the governor a lot. It was Governor Bredesen at the time, and I'd find myself sitting in a room with the CEO of Nissan while they're meeting, and in a room with the CEO of Amazon, you know? Um, just people that, again, I had no
Right.
business being in that room, but I was there to capture the moments. And I started realizing that I can do business. I can do my job, and I can also do business. I can handle, um, to a certain extent, right?
Right.
I'm a storyteller. But to be a storyteller and own your company and own a storytelling company, there's business involved. You've gotta negotiate rates and negotiate deals, and, if you're on a retainer, that's, a lot of stuff
Right.
to think about that you don't learn just being a journalist. And so I learned a lot of that, with working with the governor. And so
Okay.
It got to a point where I was like, I just really want to do something. I want to take this to the next level. And so I decided to start a company with the contacts I knew, was able to get some projects and kind of just took off. And it's been great. And that was 2012 when I
Okay.
started Smart Media.
So now you're Viz Village? Is that
Yeah, so that's the doing, doing business as. My company is called Smart Media,
okay?
Viz
How'd you
Village.
come up with that name?
Smart, yeah, right, yeah. And it's funny because there's the the whole reason why I did a doing business as, because I think Smart Media is kind of cool. The
Right.
problem is that there's a dozen different smart medias that
Ah,
LCs and
okay,
websites, and I couldn't get the URLs, all these little things that really
okay.
shouldn't matter. But I thought, well, I want to brand it as something else, and so I thought Viz Village, being a visual village, and that comes from, I own the company and I do most of the work,
Mhm.
but we work like in a village of creatives, and there's I hire people to help from time to time, and I'm the guy, but still, if I have a client that needs something that I can't do, I know people who do it, and we bring them in and we get it done. And
Okay,
so, kind of the village, it takes a village type of
okay.
thought in the
Great. So I guess, working with corporate clients, what types of shoots are you hired for? You could say everything, but are there certain ones that are more prevalent when with the corporate clients when you work with marketing and PR folks?
Mm. Well, and that's where my business model really um, kind of shows its purpose, is because when I started doing this, I didn't want to necessarily work with the agencies, because I did some of that work,
Okay.
and it's unpredictable. You're just waiting for an agency to call you. Hey, we need somebody to come shoot this big TV commercial that we're charging them $2 million. We're going to pay you, $1,000 to shoot it.
Right.
And I thought that's cool if I can get a lot of that, but to make it work, I wanted to have a different model. And so, and being in news, I learned to do so much on my own, you know,
Mhm.
and it comes back to, what did you call me? Yes, I'm a cameraman, but as a cameraman, that means that you run the camera. But as a photojournalist, it means you do all of these things. You go into a story you're thinking, you're the journalist, and later on in my career, that was something that I specialized in, was being able to go into a story by myself. I don't need a producer. I don't need a reporter. I was able to go through and do these interviews and be the journalist and the photographer. So I thought, well, I can do that in a marketing sense. I have the skills of knowing how to use the cameras, knowing how to edit, and being pretty skilled with it. I've done quite well with that, but also being able to talk to people, also being able to craft a story, and also having the philosophy behind it to not mess it up, because that's so much of it right there. And and I can and I honestly, I think that there's so many production companies that come in and they want to shape a story for the way they see it.
Mhm.
And I come at it differently. I come at it from a sense where I'm going to come in and try not to mess it up. Like, we're going to find out what the story is, and then we're going to like rise that up. We're going to rise up the story. We're not going to try to shape it too much. And we
Okay.
can still be creative. We can still do our little techniques and this and that. But for the most part, the story is the story. And I want to kind of credit Vince Gill for that,
Okay.
because Vince Gill's songwriter, singer, guitar player, and he did a record years ago, uh, 10 or so years ago, and I'm trying to think of the name of the record. Um, I'm not gonna be able to think of it, but they asked him, "There's not a lot of guitar on this, Vince. Why didn't you show off your guitar skills on this record as much?" And he said, "Because the songs didn't need it." He said,
Okay.
when he writes these songs, he's like, "The songs tell." This is you know this is Vince Gill talking. He said, "The
Right.
songs tell me whether what they need." And if they didn't need guitar, and it's to hear him say it makes more sense. But uh,
Right.
so I go into it, and it's like it was the same way. There's so many times you go into a story. What is the story needing? How visually, what is the story saying to me? Instead of me coming in with my style and saying, I want to use a drone for this, and we want to shape the story this way. I let the story tell me what it wants.
No, that's great. And I guess, one thing I was thinking about, obviously there are a lot of competitors out there, but I'm getting my visual. This is a competitor for you. I know nothing about videography, and I can shoot a pretty high quality, not film, but video edited with free software. I'm not to say I'm not clearly a competition. What are the points when, oh, it's okay to use something like that versus you will notice a difference when you hire a professional videographer? When you should almost always have a professional videographer when A, B, whatever you want to say.
Sure. Um, so yes, the answer is yes. Yes, yes, yes. I think that in the world of advertising, marketing, PR, use all of it. You know, if you're at an event and you know you don't have a full time professional videographer there, have your people take out their cell phones and shoot it and post it to socials. Um, and then when it's time for that professional shot, when it's time for that sit down interview with your CEO, make that look good, make that look professional. Because we're talking about your image. We're talking about if you're a nonprofit, if you're a for profit, if you're doing a television commercial, or if you're just uh, you know, I think social media is good for those little clips with your cell phone.
Okay.
And but it also has a place for the professional stuff. It really kind of, I think there's you really kind of have to trust your gut a lot of times, but I think it all works together. And I don't believe that anything in life is black and white. You know, I just feel like there's room for it all. And the other thing about the cameras is we've reached a place in technology right now with cameras that the cell phone is is as good as you know
Yeah.
my Sony FX6, full frame. Um, Sony's coming out with a brand new camera that everybody's excited about right now. Um, but it's just um, the new features are just features. The camera, the quality, we've we've reached it. It's never been this good. Every camera that you can buy has a good quality camera. Has a good image, and so I think that it really comes down to you know how you present it, how you edit it, how you mix it with B-roll, other video, how you shape the story, the message. Um, you know,
Okay. Yeah.
you're
No, that's great. And I think it's interesting. So I met you 'cause I was in North Carolina. You're in Nashville. We had an event. We needed someone to shoot. And I just happened to remember I knew someone who I met more than a decade ago who lived in Nashville, who is a PR pro, reached out to her. She gave me your name and it all worked out and more. And obviously, recommendations are the best way. But let's say I didn't know anyone in Nashville. What's the best way to reach out? Or I guess, what are some red flags? We could obviously, I'll go on Google and look for Nashville videographer or whatever. And once again, I'm sure you have a lot of competition, any major
yeah.
city, but are there certain red flag, either certain things I should look for when hiring a videographer or certain things, red flags? So, yeah, so all have probably good looking videos online. You're going to show your best stuff. But I guess what
Yeah.
should I look for? What should I look out for?
Well, you know, I I'll probably get myself in trouble.
No, it's fine. So that
but
makes it more fun. I don't want it to be
yeah.
boring.
So, there are different types of production companies
Okay.
out there, and, and I was born from television news. That's where I jumped in and started my journey. There are a lot of production companies. I'd say probably most production companies come from a place where, they're film students.
Okay.
And so, and it's when you have a production company that has leadership from, journalism, as opposed to film, they have two sets of rules, two completely different sets of boundaries. You know, for me, coming from journalism, there were lines that you don't cross.
Right.
You have to you got to get the story right. You've got to attribute your information. You've got to cross all of your I's and dot your T's, right? So um, you've got to get everything correct, or you're going to get sued.
Mhm.
And so, and in the film world, it's about it's more about shaping the story. It's more about creating the story. And I've worked with folks from that world, and it's not the way I do things. For one, when I'm working with a company, if let's say I'm working with a company and they say we want to do a video with our CEO and make him look really good. Okay. So what I'm going to do is we're going to talk, we're going to meet, I'm going to learn as much as I can about that company and that CEO, and then I'm going to come in and sit down with no script, and I hope the CEO is not memorized a long paragraph, and I'm going to come
Right.
in and wing an interview. I'm going to come in and say, "Hey, so what's your name and what do you do for this company?" I'm um, this is my name and I'm the CEO. Okay, what does this company do? And we're going to walk that interview through. And I may have an hour's worth of interview, but we're going to crunch that down into a story. There and you also have but on the other hand, you have production companies that will come in and they'll meet with you and they'll say, "Okay, we're going to write a script. We're going to get back with you in a week." And they come back and they have a script. They've got a storyboard and they have everything they want that CEO to say. And then they come in and the CEO sits down, memorizes it or has a teleprompter or whatever you end up doing, and that CEO nails it. And it looks so good and it's about as perfect as it can be, but there's still something there that sounds scripted when you see that video. You just as a human, you feel it. You
Yep.
feel it just like I can hear auto tune on a song. It's the same thing. It's the same feeling where this isn't. It's
Yeah.
something.
No, no.
Something's not
I hear that. I mean,
true here.
yeah. I mean, a lot of times you see that in press releases. I mean, obviously the quotes are made up there. Is like, yes, no human would ever say something
Right. Yeah.
like that. It's almost a joke. And yes, maybe not to an extent, but yes, you can tell when it's something versus, yeah, natural death. I mean, that makes a lot of
Right.
sense about the the news
Yeah.
business, and it'll truly sound off the cuff. Even if you do that same question 3 times
Yeah.
and then prepare for it, it still sounds like it's
Right. Yeah. And
yeah.
so to really kind of to sum up my point on that is, I think that when you're looking for a company, you got to decide what do you want, and I always make sure when I'm meeting with a new client that's got a request for proposal or looking for someone to work with, I always tell them I don't script anything, because I want them to know that if they're looking for something scripted, I can do it and I'll do it, but it's not what the way I like to do it. And I think it's better to do it naturally. I think it's better to go in and do interviews naturally, like a journalist would do it. And I just say that, that's typically how I do it. And if you're good with that, then let's do it. Um, and then as far as the video capture, um, the 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 structure of a lot of production companies, um, the bigger production companies, essentially what you'll have is you'll have someone that's got an MBA. They went to business school and they don't know anything about video or they don't know anything about storytelling. They never spend any time in it at all, but
Mhm.
they've got some money, they've got a degree, and so they start a company. And then they start hiring storytellers, start hiring videographers, and they start hiring producers. And a lot of times you'll get, when you look at their websites, you'll see, our star videographer, um, he's 24 years old and he won a film contest in college, and he shoots beautiful images, and he's great with the drone, and he's great with the the gimbals and all that kind of thing, and that's great, and you can get some really nice videos that way. Um, but I'm old school, and I like to approach things as organically as possible.
No, I think it all makes perfect sense. I think it's funny, a lot of us communicators, we wanna script it. We wanna get rid of the unknown, but your point's very well taken, though. You can tell the difference. And once again, this is still scripted to a degree. We still have the final say. And but yeah, I do. I didn't think about it that way, but yes, it definitely makes a lot of sense what you're saying.
Yeah.
Um, uh, you hit on just a tiny bit, but we often have no idea reaching out. Like, I mean, I'll give the example with you. I had no idea what you would charge, what I should even expect to pay. So, not to get in details about that, a lot of times there might be hidden costs that come up for for the marketer. So you may say whatever 5,000 just this argument, but then maybe there's other ones where if there's a drone or you say, oh, it's a complicated shoot. What are some other things that we need to think about when budgeting beyond just the videographer's time for that?
Yeah, so that's another question that you have to when you're in search of a company to work with, it's something to ask them because, um, you say, in this budget, am I going to get hit with, are you going to hit me with line items? Are you going to go through and say, um, we're going to charge you this much for the camera that day, this much for the audio technician, this much for the drone, this much for, and most, I think most production companies don't do that nowadays. They do, but they don't, right? So I think that um, I personally charge on a project basis. So we talk, we figure out what we want to do. We find out what the final deliverables are going to be. So if I'm working with one of my biggest clients, Vanderbilt, and I say, what do you want? And they say, we want a 4-minute video showcasing XYZ. And I say, okay. And I think about that and I say, okay, well, it's going to take this much time. Um, do I want to drone it? Do I want to get any aerials? Do I want to see the roof of Vanderbilt? Not necessarily, but are there opportunities to see other things to use the drone? Um, do I need to use a steady cam? Do I need to use a teleprompter? Do I need to how many lights, how many different interviews, how many shoot days? So I work all that up for me and then I give an estimate, project estimate. And then you as the client, you say, okay, well that's good. That works. And let's say, okay, let's sign on it. And we're not going above that unless we're traveling, unless you need me to go to Washington or if you need me to go to California, then those are,
Right.
hotel and that kind of stuff will go on. And that's understandable. But once we agree on a project cost, we don't go over that. That's it. And if I mess up and I end up having to shoot an extra day because I did something wrong or I didn't think about that, or if it takes me longer to edit something, that's my problem. I'm I gave the quote and this is
Right.
what we're going to do. The other thing with the line items is most production companies, a lot of times production companies will want to use $100,000 camera and they don't own $100,000 camera. And so they want to, they'll rent the camera. And so you'll see on your bill, if you're dealing with production companies, they'll have a line item that says camera rental, and it'll be $2,500 for 2 days. And I don't do that. I own all my own cameras. I use cameras that they're not $100,000; they're $10,000 each. and they're paid off, and I use them, and I don't charge the client for that because that's my tool. You know, if
Mhm.
if I'm hiring somebody to mow my yard, I shouldn't have to
Right.
pay for their mower, right? And so, those are the costs of doing business for me.
Okay.
Um, and if I'm working on a project and it needs a drone, I'm a certified drone operator. I have a drone. It's in my kit and I use it. I don't charge extra for that. And so I think it's just again, it's part of these are questions you ask. What am when you're talking to somebody? What are you charging me for? Like, what's going to be what's the final? And then you've got to make sure and say there's no surprises at the end
Okay.
because I think that does happen.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And I guess to sort of combine a couple thoughts in one, what can we as communicators do to make your job easier to get the product we want? And at the same time, I always joke, any shoot, I'll be, oh, well, we'll just fix that in post. Well, yes, you can. And you've done some amazing things for us. I have no idea how you did in post when we, didn't see things when it was live. But ideally, you don't want to do that. So, I guess sort of related, what can we do to help you make your job better and to lower the chances or the need to quote unquote fix something in
Mm.
post?
Yeah, I think honesty. Like, don't ever worry about hurting um, the feelings of the person you're working with. Be fair. You don't have to be rude, but if I if I send a draft, a first draft or a video, and it's just not working, I would rather the client say it's not working. Can we? Because no, the chances are that by the time I've sent that draft, I've already got 3 or 4 different versions in my head that I could do if you don't like this. You know,
Okay.
when you're dealing with this kind of stuff, so if I'm doing a story and it's got 3 interviews, each interview, let's say, is 15 minutes long. Let's say I was really efficient in the interview, 15 minutes. So that's 45 minutes of sound on tape, if you will.
Right.
Pare that down to those 3. After you get all the best stuff for the story, when you're editing, you're paring it down to 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes of really good sound bites that you could use for this video.
Hmm.
Now you've got to knock that down to 4 minutes or 2.5 minutes or one
Right.
minute, depending on what the client wants.
Right.
And so there's so much stuff. What I'm sending you is from our meetings, from me learning about your company, learning about what you need, doing the interviews. This is my professional uh, uh, take on what we're doing. And here's the first draft. And if I send that to you and you're like, man, first of all, if you love it, tell us we love it. Tell me I love it. You love it because that'd be great. But if
Right.
you're like, we like it, but didn't we say, can we add something about yes, 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 yes. Never feel like you're paying for my services, which means now I'm now on your team, right? Like I'm not just some dude out there that
Right.
doesn't care. If you're paying me to come tell your story as a professional, I'm on the team. And I wanna be I wanna know how you're feeling because I want it to be perfect. I want it to be good.
Okay. No, that's great. No, that's really interesting. Final question. When you're talking about your beginning in Panama City, talking about you went out with whatever sports reporter, sports anchor to shoot things, and what's changed since then? One is the sports anchor now, unless especially at a market like Panama City, would be the one doing all of that work.
Yeah.
Reporters, unless you're in a top, I don't know, you say 20 market, you're the reporter and you're the videographer bringing all that out. But then the other thing that's completely different, you wouldn't have thought about then, probably not 5 or 10 years ago, is AI. So how do you use AI? How has that affected your business, good and bad? Or every podcast interview I do, I somehow ask question because it's affecting
Mhm.
every single person all in different ways. So how is it impacting you?
Well, I think that, you know, I try to watch and read as much as I can about AI. And, I've heard good and I've heard bad.
Mhm.
I think ultimately I've used it, by the way. I've used it for graphics. I did a I used it quite extensively for a video for a nonprofit last year where we were kind of doing this fun video about this kid that was in high school and telling her story that we just don't have any video of. And so I went into AI and I created these little cartoon moments based on this young girl who's now an adult, this young woman who used her image in AI to create a cartoon version of her and put her in a high school and it was really neat and it worked out really well. Um, but we weren't trying to fake anything, we weren't trying
Mhm.
to fool anyone into thinking that when the videos that you're seeing where there's real people doing things. Well, number one, you can see it. You can tell by the way their face
Right.
is. It just doesn't seem human. But I think those are dangerous. Um, however, I sat through this hour talk last year on AI. It was a Vanderbilt student, PhD student, and she was telling her, her her some of her studies that she's done. And what I took out of that was use AI for the tedious stuff. Use it for the things that can save you an hours of work, but don't let it replace the real you. The heart of what you do. And so some of the things that I think it's good for, like I don't think that if someone asked me to write a story about news copy on something, I don't think I should go to AI and say write a story about blah 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 and then be done with it.
Mhm.
But if I have one of the things that I've been playing with recently is I have a transcript of an hour long interview, and I'll go through and I'll say you know, without changing any of the dialogue in this transcript, um, gather sound bites that might say this. And I've been playing with that. I haven't quite used it yet, but
Okay.
because there are some issues with that, but it does pull some things that it does save a little bit of time doing that. And again,
Okay.
we're just playing with it at this point.
Yeah.
Um,
And I like the example you said about, in essence, I guess, the animation for the nonprofit that 5 years ago, 3 years ago, you wouldn't be able to do it. Probably a nonprofit would not be able to afford anything remotely like that with animation. So, I mean, I think it's, in essence, in that case, it's a bonus to your client making a completely different video. What you're saying, you're not faking it. You know it's animation, whether how it was made or whatever. Maybe people can get in semantics about that, but I mean, for this, it's not. You're not adding a different person to the room. So no, I thought that's fascinating. So, are there any questions I didn't ask you? Is there something that you thought I would ask about? Anything that about the industry? Anything that communicators, marketers, that could make, we talked about honesty. Any other things that make your job easier or more likely to get the client what they are expecting? We all have our ideas in our head, and sometimes it's hard to enunciate it. But anything, once back to making the job easier to get what is in our head to the finished product.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is if you're out there, if you're in PR, you're in marketing department for a company or nonprofit, and you've been tasked with finding an outside video source, storyteller source, and you're looking for somebody, you know, uh, just have a good set of questions, and really do your homework and find out what you want to do because and don't always judge make your decision based on the pricing. Um, and you'll know because, if you bid out a 2-minute video for 5 different video production companies, you're gonna get 5 wildly different cost estimates,
Mm,
depending on how they do it, are they gonna have a 10-person crew, or are they gonna have a one-person crew? Or are they gonna, um, what, there's so many variables. but, figure out what you wanna do, and I think that one of the key things for me on my side of things is it's important for me to have a relationship with every company that I work with, every nonprofit that I work with. Again, when I'm hired to do something, I come in as a team member. I come in as a person that is I'm there to make this as good as possible, you know? Maybe it's my age, maybe it's because I've done it so long, but I truly leave my ego at the door, you know? I want it to be good. That's the only ego I have. I want it to be good. But I want it to be good because for so many reasons, I want you to be happy. I want you to hire me again.
Hmm.
Uh, I want you to refer me for other clients. I just want to I want to do a good job. And so to be able to do that, you have to be a team player. And I'm also Generation X. So I you know,
Yes, well,
I
I am too. No, no, no. It's
yeah.
no, and I think that's a perfect way to end that. Really appreciate your time. I mean, I don't know if you could tell my face. I was truly like, wow, that was interesting. I didn't, in my head, okay, he might answer this way, might answer that, and really went on different ways. So I really appreciate your
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Happy to be here.
And oh yes, and as I tell check out Clint's website, Viz Village, VIZVILLAGE.com. And it's mentioned before he's based in Nashville. I know you shoot around the world. There's a lot of great clips
Yeah.
on the website about different places around the world you shoot. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you,
Happy
Clint.
to Yeah, thank you so much for asking.